at the end of book 6 turns to a central question that already came up. We talked about how the wise in the city and the person with reason in their soul are going to need to know what's good for either the individual or the city as a whole. But what is good? How can we know what the good is? That's the question that Glaucon and Adeimantus bring to Socrates. And he doesn't directly answer. Instead, he gives a series of analogies that we're going to look at now. First, Socrates notes that there's something really special about the good. Because there are other cases, even like the case of justice, where people might only care about seeming just and not actually being just. But no one wants what seems good. People only want what actually is good. So how do we figure that out? Socrates says this is really the most difficult and most important question. But he's not going to be able to tell them that in full precision. Instead, what he's going to do, 506e, is tell you about what seems to be an offspring of the good and most like it. And that's where we get our first analogy, the analogy of the sun. Okay. And everyone can see the slide. We're good? So we'll start there with, this is the best illustration of the sun and the forms that I could find. I need to, too bad I can't draw. So there, oh, you can't even see it got cut off. Oh, well. There you got the sun up on the left, shining down on a tree, which we're then seeing, and then the good is shining on the forms, which then we're knowing. So here Socrates starts out with something special about sight. And that is the fact that even if our eyes are fully operational, we're not blind or visually impaired at all, often we're unable to see because it's dark, because of the absence of light. So sight is kind of a special case where you don't just need an eye, you need an eye and you need light to make things visible. And where does that light ultimately come from? It comes from the sun. And that, Socrates suggests, is analogous to the role that the form of the good plays when it comes to intellectual sight, to knowing things through reason. That the form of the good provides truth and illuminates the things that our soul or mind is able to understand. So the sun shines down on the world. I can see it shining outside my window, and I can see, well, I'm not even looking directly at the sun, but I'm only able to see the trees and houses and things outside my window because they've been made visible by the light of the sun. And it's like that in the intellectual case, Socrates suggests, that I'm only able to understand the form of equality or justice or threeness because those forms are illuminated by and made intelligible by the form of the good. So what the form of the good is in the intelligible realm in relation to understanding and intelligible things, the sun is in the visible realm in relation to sight and visible things. They say at 349c. And so what gives truth to the things known and the power to know to the knower is the form of the good at E. And in fact, it goes even further, that both the sun and the form of the good do even more. 509b. The sun, Socrates says, you would say, not only gives visible things the power to be seen, but also provides for their coming to be, growth, and nourishment, although it is not itself coming to be. So there he's pointing out, not only does the sun make things visible, but when I look at my backyard and see, if not grass, there's at least some stuff growing there. And why is it growing there? Because of the sunlight. The sun's light is what enables plants and other living things to grow up. So it's not just the cause of their being seen. It is that by giving them light, but it also is responsible for their coming to be, their nourishment and growth. And analogously, Socrates suggests if that's true of the sun, then in the case of the form of the good, we should say at the end of B that not only do the objects of knowledge owe their being known to the good, but their existence and being are also due to it, although the good is not being, but something yet beyond being, superior to it in rank and power. So if we carry this analogy through, Socrates says, the form of the good doesn't just make other forms intelligible, it's actually the cause of their very being. So why is there a form of justice, a form of threeness, a form of equality, a form of beauty? Remember in the Phaedo, Socrates just hypothesized the forms. So let's assume that there are these forms to give safe answers and explanations and see what follows, but we didn't defend. Here, the suggestion is, if we actually saw the form of the good, we would see why all the other forms are, and we'd understand the form of the good as their cause, and as this kind of superior cause, that the other forms are and have being, but the form of the good is even beyond that, because it's not interrelated or dependent. It's even above the level of the forms. So if you thought the forms were impressive, the form of the good is literally on a whole other level. And later Platonists would develop this into the idea of the one that's above the world of forms and understanding and intellection. There's this one ultimate first principle in good that's just can't be described by human thought, but it can only be grasped insofar as it's the cause of goodness and being in things. And it's not clear if Plato wants to go quite that far, but this really is the inspiration, and it's an analogy that you can take in a bunch of different directions. Okay, so Danielle's question: the sun basically allows us to see everything that's visible. So it's like the sun doesn't help you understand geometry or do anything intellectual. It only helps with the perceptible and visible things. And there are going to be some beautiful things, some ugly things, some dark, some light, and we'll get to those levels with the other two analogies. So the sun's kind of undifferentiatedly allowing you to see stuff that can be seen. And there it's a little bit different in the case of the good, since the form of the good is causing the forms, and the forms are all good or positive. Or at least that's something that comes up in the later Platonic dialogues that we're not going to fully get into. But in the Parmenides asks the young Socrates if there's going to be a form of dirt and these ugly things. And Socrates, the young Socrates, causes him to wonder whether the forms need to be restricted. Is the form of the good God? Owen asks. Very good question. So I could say two things to that. First, the form of the good is treated as the ultimate principle, and so the thing that's sort of most divine on the Platonic system. And some later Platonists identify that being with God or Zeus. Some sort of allow that there are these lesser divine beings, but then take the one to be ultimate. And then a lot of later thinkers influenced by Platonism, but coming out of Jewish traditions like Philo of Alexandria, one of the first to do this, and then Christian traditions in the early church fathers and the medieval, and in Islamic philosophy as well. A lot of people do identify the form of the good with God. But then there are both critiques that this view of the form of the good, it doesn't sufficiently fit with the revealed God of Abrahamic religions, and there are also questions about whether the form of the good is did here, well, we just don't know much about its causation or the way that it operates, other than it's supposed to cause these forms. So this is like one of the most influential passages for philosophical theology going forward, but it's short and sort of cryptic, and so it's taken in all kinds of different directions. Other questions on this analogy? Does it make sense as an analogy? So we've got the sun provides light, the good provides truth. Light to allow the eye to see versus truth to allow the soul to understand.